8 years ago, Porsche introduced the 918 Spyder. It is a mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, hybrid supercar that sprints to 60 in 2.6 seconds and costs nearly $1 million. 8 years later, we're here with the Corvette E-Ray. It is a mid-engine, hybrid V8 supercar that sprints to 60 in just 2.5 seconds and costs comparatively less at $120,000. Today, we're going to take it out on track and see exactly how good it stacks up to its Corvette competitors as well as its European competitors. This is Out Motorsports. My name is Tyler. Let's go have some fun. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over exactly what the E-Ray is, as well as some quick specs. Forgive the amount of voiceover in this video. We didn't have a ton of time to stand up in front of the camera and film, but most importantly, we did have time on the track and on the street to get a good feel for how this car performs. So, the E-Ray sits on the wider Z06 chassis that we reviewed earlier in the year. You have the base C8 Stingray on the slightly skinnier chassis, for lack of a better word, and then the Z06 and the E-Ray on the wider chassis for more rubber. The E-Ray has the same 6.2-liter LT2 V8 from the base Stingray that drives the rear wheels and a 160 horsepower electric motor mounted in the front that drives the front wheels. They're mated together through a ton of computer trickery that GM calls E all-wheel drive for a combined 655 horsepower. This isn't a plug-in hybrid. The battery pack sits encased in the chassis right between the driver and the passenger seat, and it is solely recharged through regenerative braking and regenerative energy from the front axle. It can only go 3 or 4 miles on pure electric in a mode that GM calls stealth mode, but honestly they said they couldn't care less how far it went on pure electric power because the electric motor is there first and foremost as a performance enhancer. So it is made to make this Corvette go quicker, and everything else is sort of an afterthought, but not really. Carbon ceramic brakes come standard, and they're wrapped in 345 with Michelin high-performance all-season tires, which is a hint at how GM is positioning this all-wheel drive Corvette for everyday use. So, without further ado, let's get the E-Ray out on the Autocross course and out on Pikes Peak International Raceway. I didn't say much in-car for this Autocross portion, so enjoy the noise, and most importantly, enjoy the drifts. For trying to do a fancy exit. I don't know what they're saying, it rotates. Okay, so heading out onto Pikes Peak International Raceway. This is our warm-up lap, so we'll recap some of that autocross I just did a little bit earlier since I didn't get to talk much. We're going to do some infield and looks like some back straight here at Pikes Peak International Raceway, but takeaways from the autocross, or are you really do feel that electric motor pulling you through the corners as soon as you try to put to apply power either coming out of the corner or mid-corner. You feel the immediate torque shove, the torque fill that electric motor gives you in down low in the RPM range, where you wouldn't necessarily be getting it just with the V8. It fills in that torque really nicely. The one thing I was worried about without driving anything was if it would feel too safe, if it wouldn't allow for any sort of rotation or play. And with traction control on,
It reeled me in very safely, but it was a essentially seamless traction control. I could tell it was on in certain parts, but otherwise I couldn't really tell. I did another run with traction control off, which you saw with the drift, and that obviously allowed for rotation. It allowed for rotation on throttle, so it still made the car feel very, very rear bias on throttle. But once I did the drift, it allowed for the rear to slip and the front to do a little bit. But if you could tell, my hands were very busy. It didn't really like to be sideways. A car on 345 section tires that's all-wheel drive just didn't really like it. But heading back out for a quicker lap now on Pikes Peak, giving it some more power. We have traction control on, and we're in a pretty safe mode out here for this lead follow, but hopefully we go quick. So, hitting the brakes a little bit, they are strong and they bite. I can't imagine these things fading at all. Powering out. It is so fast coming out of corners, and you don't have to worry about oversteer. Just the way that front engine seems to pull you through. Getting out here into a little bit more technical direction changes here. You do feel the front end understeer through this part, it feels like a little bit. We'll hopefully see out on the next lap. It looks like they're going to have us down here through like a cool down, and hopefully maybe switch up some directions. Yeah. We were originally supposed to have more time on track, but I believe the first session had some technical difficulties, so we'll see how we go here. Okay, so I am behind the leader now, and I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to stick to his butt. The faster, the better. Although we're already kind of pushing it, we're starting to push it a little bit harder now. So, heading back out on from the pit lane. Let's go, let's go, let's go! Alright, so for full throttle now, electronics and front motor are doing their thing just to pull us through this corner. Harder on the brakes now, still absolutely no sign of fade. Turn in is pretty sharp, kind of natural, and mid-corner balance right there kind of starts to tend to oversteer. Hard back on the brakes for getting into this more technical part right here. Pushing more towards understeer again, but the change of direction, just to dab on the brakes and it dives in. Tap the brakes, dive in again. It does tend towards understeer, but the change of direction is great. Very predictable. That was a much quicker lap that time. Yeah, it's a easy to drive car at the limit. It behaves very well, does everything that you tell it to do, but it's not scary to drive fast. It doesn't make you feel like it's going to step out on you or do anything scary. Back out, floored again. Feel the chassis moving around a little bit under all the forces here, but for the amount of grip this has, the body control is phenomenal. Heading back, diving down onto the brakes again. In for that sharp turn in, earlier on the power this time. It just rockets out. It really is insane. Harder back on the brakes for this technical section. I'm going to push it a little bit harder now and see if it just tends to more understeer, or if it'll maybe go a little bit more sideways. Turn in, dab to the brakes. Yeah, it keeps pushing, but it's predictable, safe, and it's still like well behaved. It does what you tell it to do, and it's not scary. It's incredibly fast. Alright, so I'm going to pull over here and let these other guys pass me, but I'm going to shut up and you guys can just listen to how this Corvette E-Ray sounds on the track. Notice you hear the V8, and you also hear a slightly different whine that you get, I believe, through the speakers, and that's the sound of the electric motor. They've actually sound-tuned this car differently than they have the Z06 and the regular C8 Stingray. Okay, so voiceover Tyler has resumed while we watch the rest of these laps at Pikes Peak International Raceway, but I just wanted to go over some final thoughts that I didn't get a chance to go over out in Colorado. Going into this day, I didn't really know what to expect out of how the car drove, and I tried to just keep an open mind and not rush to any conclusions based off of specs on paper, and I'm glad I did that. What I was hoping for was a seamless driving experience as far as how the V8 engine and the front drive axle, the front electric drive axle, were integrated and tuned, and honestly, that was pretty much the case. The best thing that you can say about any car that has this much technology and that is a hybrid supercar is that it feels natural, and that really was the case 99% of the time with this E-Ray Corvette. The only time I think that wasn't the case and where I had to adapt to the car as opposed to the car doing what I wanted it to do was when we did that drifting skid pad exercise. Most cars, when you initiate a drift like that, or most rear-wheel drive cars, or even all-wheel drive cars that have like pretty consistent lockup between the differentials, you kind of just get on the gas and then you balance it with the throttle. This Corvette E-Ray didn't really want you to balance with the throttle. You kind of had to keep a consistent throttle position, like past a certain point, let's just say past like half throttle, and that basically told the computers to let the car stay sideways so you could do like hooligan things. However, the rest of the time, when you try to be like tight and technical, and when you just try to drive fast, the car is incredibly predictable. You would think that something with 345 width tires would kind of be rough and hard to approach the limits, or scary to approach the limits, but once you get over the absolute speed of it all, it wasn't scary. It was actually very approachable and very easy to drive. Steering feel was very good. It loaded up pretty nicely, although some smaller imperfections in the road were kind of harder to feel. So compared to the rest of the Corvette lineup, or compared to the Z06, this is the more quiet, the more effortless, the more all-season performer. And I think when you look at it that way, this E-Ray really does make a lot of sense. Most Corvette owners, or most of the people who are going to buy this car, probably won't be taking it on the track like this. I'd imagine maybe it'll see a drag strip here and there, but for the most part, I think if you're going to take your Corvette to the track and do a lot of track days, you're probably going to get the Z06 as opposed to this E-Ray. The E-Ray will be more of like a weekend car, or maybe a car that you kind of split with your other daily driver that sees the worst weather, but Corvette really, or GM really, is trying to convince the buyers here that, you know, with these all-season tires and with the all-wheel drive, this E-Ray can deal with almost any situation as long as the snow is not too tall to physically drive through it. Compared to its European competitors, it may lack some of that outright finesse and agility and electronic tuning that the European competitors have, like McLaren and Porsche,
would in the 918 Spyder, but the price here reflects that, and what you get for the money is an insane amount of speed and just outright ability. So overall, this Corvette E-Ray is, I never thought I would say that a $120,000 car is a bargain for what you get, but when you look at it compared to its European competitors and the straight up specs on paper, it really is. When you drive it on track and when you drive it fast and even on the street, it is still predictable and fun, ridiculously fast, obviously, and I think Corvette has really done a good job here at creating a new version of a Corvette, a Corvette that is set aside from what already exists. So, I wanted to thank GM for sending us out to Colorado for this experience. We were some of the first people in the entire world to drive this E-Ray Corvette, and that really does mean a lot to us. So, thank you to GM. Thank you guys so much for watching. And please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.